And now, knowing the lessons of the past, we could prepare for the change to come. We could rebuild the world for them to live in, rebuild it psychically as well as physically. We'd plan to eliminate the rivalry between the large and the small, the strong and the weak. It wouldn't be difficult because there's plenty for all. There'd be no trouble as there was in the old days. We've learned to be psychologically flexible." Littlejohn smiled. "Then that is the solution?" he asked. "Yes. Eliminating the Leffingwell injections will give us a good proportion of normal children again. But where do we find the normal women to bear them?" "Normal women?" Thurmond sighed, then reached over and placed a scroll in the scanner. "I have already gone into that question with research technicians," he said, "and I have the figures here." He switched on the scanner and began to read. "The average nubile female aged 13 to 21 is 2 feet 10 inches high and weighs 48 pounds. Thurmond flicked the switch again and peered up. "I don't think I'll bother with pelvic measurements," he said. "You can already see that giving birth to a 6 or 7 pound infant is physically impossible under the circumstances. It cannot be done." "But surely there must be some larger females, perhaps a system of selective breeding on a gradual basis." "You're talking in terms of generations. We haven't got that much time." Thurmond shook his head. "No, we're stopped right here. We can't get normal babies without normal women, and the only normal women are those who began life as normal babies." "Which comes first?" Littlejohn murmured. "The chicken or the egg?" "What's that?" "Nothing. Just an old saying from history." Thurmond frowned. "Apparently, then, that's all you can offer in your professional capacity as a historian, just some old sayings." He sighed. "Too bad you don't know some old prayers, because we need them now." He bowed his head, signifying the end of the interview. Littlejohn rolled out of the room. His copter took him back to his own dwelling back across the rooftops of New Chicago. Ordinarily, Littlejohn avoided looking down. He dreaded heights, and the immensity of the city itself was somehow appalling. But now he gazed upon the capital and center of civilization with a certain morbid affection. New Chicago had risen on the ashes of the old, after the war's end. Use of thermonukes had been limited, fortunately, so radioactivity did not linger, and the vast craters hollowed out by ordinary warheads had been partially filled in by rubble and debris. Artificial fill had done the rest of the job, so that now New Chicago was merely a flat prairie, as it must have been hundreds of years ago. A flat prairie on which the city had been resurrected. There were almost 50,000 people here in the capital, the largest congregation of population on the entire continent. They had built well and surely this time, built for the security and certainty of centuries to come. Littlejohn sighed. It was hard to accept the fact that they had been wrong, that all this would end in nothingness. They had eliminated war, eliminated disease, eliminated famine, eliminated social inequality, injustice, disorders external and internal, and in so doing they had eliminated themselves. The sun was setting in the west, and long shadows crept over the city below. Yes, the sun was setting and the shadows were gathering. The night was coming to claim its own. Darkness was falling, eternal darkness. It was quite dark by the time Littlejohn's copter landed on the rooftop of his own dwelling. So dark, in fact, that for a moment he didn't see the strange vehicle already standing there. Not until he had settled into his coaster chair did he notice the presence of the other copter, and then it was too late. Too late to do anything except sit and stare as the gigantic shadow loomed out of the night, silhouetted against the sky. The shadow shambled forward, and Littlejohn gaped in terror at the titanic figure. He opened his mouth to speak, but words did not form. There were no words to form, for how does one address an apparition? Instead, it was the apparition which spoke. "I have been waiting for you," it said. Yes?" "I want to talk to you." The voice was deep, menacing. Littlejohn shifted in his coaster chair. There was nowhere to go, no escape. He gazed up at the shadow. Finally he summoned a response. "Shall we go inside?" he asked. The figure shook its head. "Where? Down into that dollhouse of yours? It isn't big enough. I've already been there. What I have to say can be said right here." Who are you?" The figure stepped forward so that its face was illuminated by the fluorescence streaming in the open door which led to the inclined chairway descending to Littlejohn's dwelling. Littlejohn could see the face now, the gigantic, wrinkled face, scarred and seared and seamed. It was a human face, but utterly alien to the humanity Littlejohn knew. Faces such as this one had disappeared from the earth a lifetime ago. At least, history had taught him that. History had not prepared him for the actual living presence of a naturalist. Littlejohn gasped. "You're a naturalist. Yes, that's what you are." The apparition scowled. "I am not a naturalist. I am a man." "But you can't be. The war." "I am very old. I lived through your war. I have lived through your peace. Soon I shall die. But before I do, there is something else which must be done." "You've come here to kill me?" "Perhaps." The looming figure moved closer and stared down. "No, don't try to summon help. When your servants saw me, they fled. You're alone now, Littlejohn." "You know my name?" "Yes, I know your name. I know the names of everyone on the council. Each of them has a visitor tonight." "Then it's a plot, a conspiracy?" "We have planned this very carefully through the long years. It's all we lived for, those few of us who survived the war." "But the council wasn't responsible for the war. Most of us weren't even alive then. Believe me, we weren't to blame." "I know." The gigantic face creased in a senile simulation of a smile. "Nobody was ever to blame for anything. Nobody was ever responsible. That's what they always told me. I mustn't hate mankind for multiplying, even though population created pressure, and pressure created panic, and that drove me mad. I mustn't blame Leffingwell for solving the overpopulation problem, even though he used me as a guinea pig in his experiments. I mustn't blame the Yardsticks for penning me up in a prison until revolution broke out. And I mustn't blame the naturalists for bombing the place where I took refuge. So whose fault was it that I've gone through 80 years of a sordid hell? Why did I, Harry Collins, get singled out for a lifetime of misery and misfortune?" The huge old man bent over Littlejohn's huddled form. "Maybe it was all a means to an end, a way of bringing me here, at this moment, to do what must be done." Don't harm me. You're not well. You're—" "Crazy?" The old man shook his head. "No, I'm not crazy. Not now. But I have been at times during my life. Perhaps we all are when we attempt to face up to the complications of an average existence. Try to confront the problems which are too big for a single consciousness to cope with in a single lifespan. I've been crazy in the city, and crazy in the isolation of a cell, and crazy in the welter of war. And perhaps the worst time of all was when I lost my son. Yes, I had a son, Littlejohn. He was one of the first, one of Leffingwell's original mutations, and I never knew him very well until the revolution came and we went away together. He was a doctor, my boy, and a good one. We spent almost 5 years together, and I learned a lot from him, about medicine, but that wasn't important then. I'm thinking of what I learned about love. I'd always hated yardsticks, but my son was one, and I came to love him. He had plans for rebuilding the world, he and I and the rest of us. We were going to wait until the revolution ended and then help restore sanity and civilization. But the naturalists flew over and dropped their bomb, and my boy died. Over 400 of our group died there in the canyon, 400 who might have changed the fate of the world. Do you think I can forget that? Do you think I and the few others who survived have ever forgotten? Can you blame us if we did go crazy, if we hid away out there in the western wilderness, hid away from a world that had offered us nothing but death and destruction, and plotted to bring death and destruction to that world in return? Think about it for a moment, Littlejohn. We were old men, all of us, and the world had given us only its misery to bear during our lifetimes. The world we wanted to save was destroying itself. Why should we be concerned with its fate or future? So we changed our plans, Littlejohn. Perhaps the shock had been too much. Instead of plotting to rebuild the world, we turned our thoughts to completing its destruction. Our tools and texts were gone, buried in the rubble with the bodies of fine young men. But we had our minds, crazed minds you'd call them, but aware of reality, the grim reality of the post-revolutionary years. We burrowed away in the desert. We schemed and we dreamed. From time to time we sent out spies. We knew what was going on. We knew the naturalists were gone, that 6-footers had vanished from a yardstick world. We knew about the rehabilitation projects. We watched your people gradually evolve new patterns of living and learning. Some of the former knowledge was rescued, but not all. Our little group had far more learning than you've ever dreamt of. 50 of us between ourselves could have surpassed all your scientists in every field. But we watched and we waited. And some of us died of privation, and some of us died of old age, until at last there